Welcome to another episode of Splash Considerations. My name is Justice De Los Santos, San Francisco Giants beat reporter for the San Jose Mercury News, and we've got a fun two-part episode here following the Giants being swept by the New York Yankees to begin the Tony Vitello era. The first part of this episode, it's going to be a conversation that I had with friend of the program, Shayna Rubin of the San Francisco Chronicle. We obviously got into everything that the last technically 4 days in San Francisco entailed, talked about opening night, and then talked about opening day, and then I guess technically opening afternoon as well, and got into the Giants' offensive struggles over the course of the first 3 games of the season, talked about Vitello's kind of interesting post-game comments after the game on Friday, talked about some of the lack of utilization of the bench on Saturday, and one thing, a couple things that I wanted to mention that we didn't get to during recording. First and foremost, opening night marked the first time since the 2006 and 2007 season. I'm not phrasing that correctly, but basically the infamous left field streak is now over, courtesy of one Elliot Ramos. I asked Vitello the day before whether or not he was going to use Elliot in left field, whether he was going to be the one to finally break that streak, and Vitello said, breaking news, he's going to be the one in left field. So I can't recite the list of guys off the top of my head, but it was 19 different left fielders in 19 different years, and I was able to do a story that ran the morning of opening night that talked to a couple kind of characters that were involved with that. Talked to Elliot Ramos, of course, but also had the opportunity to talk to Bruce Bochy, who was obviously the manager for the first 13 years of that streak, talked to Blake Sable, talked to Hunter Pence. I think it ended up being like a very fun story because it got into some of the quirks, some of the intricacies of that streak, because when you have a streak of that nature, there's bound to be some quirks and some intricacies along the way. One point that I wanted to make here as well, because Shayna and I discussed some of the managerial decisions that Tony Vitello made over the course of his first 3 games. And again, I want to emphasize early on that it's 3 games. It's not a super big sample size. We can't have a definitive idea of how Vitello is going to run his team just based off 3 games. But one thing that I want to mention that we didn't mention during our conversation was the decision on Saturday to pitch to Aaron Judge. I believe it was either the 4th inning or the 5th inning where Ryan Borucki enters the ballgame to face a pocket of lefties. He's able to punch out Austin Wells. I think he gets Trent Grisham to ground out. And with no runners on, again, I think top of the 4th, top of the 5th, Aaron Judge comes to the plate and ends up hitting a solo homer that extended the Giants' the Yankees' lead rather, to 3-1. And when we asked Vitello after the game, he said, there was consideration for pitching around Judge, but they ended up going after him, and they went after him and got burned. And Vitello said something to the effect of, that's why he's a pretty good player, more than pretty good as well. So just wanted to make a quick note of that as well, if you're wondering why we didn't discuss that specific, I guess technically non-decision over the course of our conversation about the decisions that Vitello made. Also had an opportunity to spend a couple minutes with none other than Ken Rosenthal prior to the game on Saturday. We talked about his initial impressions of Tony Vitello, what are the things that he's going to be watching going forward with Vitello, and also talked about the Giants' offseason as a whole a little bit as well. So incredibly grateful to Ken that even as he was preparing for the Saturday broadcast, which for those of you who may not know, it is a lot of moving pieces when you are preparing for a national broadcast, even as he was having to navigate everything he had to navigate pregame, incredibly grateful that he was able to hop on the pod for a couple minutes and discuss his overall impressions of, again, Vitello and the Giants of a whole. So you're going to hear that conversation with Shayna and I first, and then you will hear the conversation that I had with Ken on the back half end of this episode. So that's enough from me as far as an introduction to this episode. If you like the podcast or YouTube show, whatever you want to call it, feel free to subscribe, feel free to follow on Apple or Spotify. Even with the price of pretty much everything kind of going up these days, it is still just free 99 to subscribe, to follow. It costs you nothing except maybe 30 seconds of your time, if that. So here's my conversation that I had with Shayna, and then that's going to be followed by the conversation that I had with Ken Rosenthal. Welcome to another episode of Splash Considerations. My name is Justice De Los Santos, San Francisco Giants beat reporter for the San Jose Mercury News. That's Joey Hamhock, Grammy Award-winning producer on the beat. And I'm joined now virtually, not in person, virtually, by the illustrious baseball writer at the San Francisco Chronicle, Shayna Rubin. Shayna, how we doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm gonna be honest, Shayna. I woke up this morning and I was dragging. It just felt like such like an adrenaline, like just come down after like I know we had the off day on Thursday, but it felt like today, like waking up, this was like the moment where like my body could kind of rest. And I'm glad the Giants have an off day today too. And honestly, they could probably use one as well. They're gonna have an off day in San Diego. We're stuck here in the Bay Area, quote unquote stuck here. But I just felt that like wave of adrenaline finally wash away, and it hit me when I woke up this morning. Did you feel the same way? Because I feel like it's hitting all of us right now.
Yeah, just honestly, I just feel off. Like today is Sunday. Having no baseball, at least Giants baseball on a Sunday, is very disorienting.
Yeah,
It's just
that's
like,
part of
oh,
it.
yesterday was Saturday, today is Sunday. They play tomorrow. Okay, like it's been kind of just having the Netflix day was very it just threw everything off kilter. But yeah, you've sort of been in it for longer than I have, just in terms of like going right from spring training into the season. So it's I can imagine what that you're probably feeling very just overwhelmed by the time.
Spring training feels like it was a million years ago at this
Mhm.
point. And to kind of, build off that point, like baseball is a game of routines. And typically the way these routines go is that it's, Monday, Tuesday night game, Wednesday day game. Thursday really depends on the series, but then you get Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Sunday being a day game. So like to have like the Wednesday opening night, Thursday off day, Friday opening day, Saturday opening afternoon. I don't know what you want to call it. We can get into that in a second, but it's all very disorienting. So I am glad that beginning tomorrow with this three-game series in San Diego, we're going to start getting back to some semblance of like a normal schedule because, like you said, we just haven't had it in a while. And I know, yeah, nobody wants to hear about baseball reporters, but like this is the same thing for the players. Like baseball players are creatures of habits too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's they seem. I don't know if I want to say they seem unfazed. It's been a very strange start to the season. But yeah, it's just it's an unorthodox. It's been an unorthodox week, I guess.
Yeah, and I think given all the pop and circumstance, I think a lot of these guys are again ready to get into a normal schedule. And we've got a lot to talk about over the course of these last 3 days of Giants baseball. Obviously, as we're standing here right now, they're 0-3, they're without a win. But the one thing that I want to get into just before we get into the actual games, and we can just touch on this super quickly. They obviously announced their opening day roster a couple days ago, and after they optioned Bryce Eldridge to AAA Sacramento, which was the last video we did, which again feels like it was a million years ago at this point. But after they made that decision, the next biggest decision that they had to make was whether or not they have Luis Matos on the roster or they end up designating for assignment. That's the route that they ended up going, ending his Giants tenure. And if you want to look at it from a kind of a broader microscope, now have, Luis Matos and Marco Luciano are no longer with the organization. At one point, these guys were the future of the organization, or thought to be at least. And well, technically, Matos hasn't, been claimed by anyone yet, but, I wouldn't be surprised if sometime in the next couple of days he is. Luciano is, funny enough, currently in the Yankee system, but just overall thoughts on the Giants' decision to designate Matos for assignment, especially given that he is only 24, as well as some of the upside that he still has.
I mean, I think there was at least a little bit of suspense about the first week. Like when you have the two off days and you kind of futz around with the rotation, there's at least a chance that okay, you keep him for another week and see what you can do with him, with that roster spot, et cetera, et cetera. But they just got right to it, and it's all said. Not super surprising. I mean, the Matos was very much sort of uh didn't really fit into the sort of like main perspective of their priority over the last year plus. So it felt like he fell out of the depth chart a little bit, fell to the bottom of the depth chart a little bit. So it's sucks for it sucks for them because you have the the hype machine that sort of like you want you want fans to get excited about the type of players that you're developing and producing, and the fact that they've had two that everyone was supposed to get very excited about really just fall to the bottom of the totem pole and then into somewhat irrelevance, and then now they're kind of Luciano floating around from different organization to organization. It's got to be disappointing for them. It's never really a good look when you go from hype to nothing, just like that, and then it puts what they have going in perspective. Like, oh, you have all these hype around your top prospects now, and if none of them stick, it's like, are we going to get a repeat situation, and how much credence do we put into the hype? So it's it's never fun when the top prospects not, I don't want to say disappoint when it doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah, and it's never fun for a manager or any front office executive to have to tell somebody that they've been designated for assignment. I guess kind of the flip side of that is that Tony Vitello, as well as Buster Posey and Zach Manassian, got to tell Jared Oliva that he was on the opening day roster. Obviously, he hasn't played in the majors since 2021, was a pinch runner yesterday, and we'll get into that kind of can of worms as well. But, even if Matos was on this opening day roster, we may not have seen him these first three games, and we'll get into that broader point in a second. But I did want to run through these first three games, and we'll kind of make some pit stops along the way. And starting with opening night, which again, as we talk about this conversation of these last couple days being a lot, goodness gracious, the opening night, it was a lot. And for one, it's like a 5 o'clock start, and obviously you have like the Netflix only game, only streamed on Netflix, and it was so much. You had the Yankees, like they were running through like a taxi while there was dancers going, like coming out to terror squads, lean back. That's personally not the choice of song I would have used if I wanted to represent New York. Like, it's fine. I could have thought of maybe like 25 songs off the top of my head that were better. And then you had the Giants jumping out of a cable car to Brain Stew by Green Day, which again, fine. Not the song that I personally would have used. But again, there was dancers there. You had like the drones in right field that were like setting off smoke to mimic the American flag, the 73 red kayaks. Jameis Winston was like running around doing everything, which I thought was kind of funny. And people don't know that Jameis Winston actually played college ball. And if you want to go look it up, there's a clip of him stealing home with Carlos Correa at the plate during one of those East-West games. And then obviously you had Barry Bonds as a guest analyst. He told the story about how he almost signed with the Yankees. There's a lot of stories that were written on that. It was just before even getting into the game, Shayna. What were your overall thoughts on the Netflix experience, the Netflix of it all? Because it was a lot, and seeing some of the reactions, it felt like we were kind of better off without it. And I think the big question was this serving the sport of baseball, or was this to serve Netflix? And I think a lot of people would lean towards the latter.
I didn't really know what I was expecting. To a certain extent, I was expecting it to be a little bit out of touch, and not even a little bit, a lot out of touch. First time doing something like that, or in baseball at least. And I just thought it was, baseball is a finicky space. People are very weird about their parasocial relationships with their broadcasters and the like cadence of what they're used to on opening day and opening night. So when you mess with that, it's automatically a trigger for a lot of people. And then on top of that, it just felt very like I don't even know how to I mean, it was too much.
It was a lot. It was a lot.
Too much. Like, I don't know how else to put it. It was not even too much. It was just like I was laughing at when the dancers were like popping it to
I think
back and stuff. I was like,
that might have been like the most that might have been like the most absurd part of the entire like everything, like the cable car, it's cute. The taxis, it was cute. The dancers, I was like, what is happening?
It was just over the top, and like I understand they're trying to like they're trying to Hollywoodize the experience of East versus West and yank two historic franchises coming together in one place, and they're trying to sort of like nationalize the main parts of the cultures that were clashing, and then the ballpark itself. And it's just like, if you watch baseball core, obviously it's just like, what are we looking at? This isn't baseball. This isn't really fit in with the baseball experience. So it was kind of funny. I don't know. People get so upset. I don't know why everyone's so upset about it. It's just like, you got to take it for what it is. It was just it was an experience, and it was kind of it was a lot, and it was a little bit funny.
Yeah, I'm just thankful that Bert Kreischer didn't take off his hoodie. Like, if you don't know anything about him, that's his whole thing is like taking off his shirt, exposing his bare chest. I'm just glad, I'm just glad that he didn't do that because the way that he was running around, I was like, we might see him do that in the MLB branded hoodie too, which was
Like Rob Lowe and the
like the baseballism stores across the street. Like we could have gotten you like a better hoodie. Anyway, it was just such a weird, odd experience. You wrote a story about going in the kayak. I kind of wish I tagged along for that because it seemed like it was a cool experience. I might steal your idea because I've never done a kayak in the Cove either. As far as the game itself, it was kind of a dud. And like I
Mhm.
hate to say in baseball, like a game's over like by the second inning, but Logan Webb 1-2-3 first inning strikes out Trent Grisham, strikes out Aaron Judge on a sword nonetheless. Really sharp in the first inning, and then allows 5 runs on this hit parade in the second inning. Clean third, clean fourth, allows 2 more runs, and it was only the third time in his career that he's allowed 7 earned, not earned runs, just runs, period, in a game. And it was I think what Vitello said after the game was that this press conference is half painful, half easy, just because it was pretty straight up. They didn't play well on defense. The pitching, obviously, Logan was the only one that allowed runs, but it was 7 runs. And then the offense couldn't do anything against Max Fried and company. Opening day, it was a return to normalcy. It was following the off day on Thursday. It was everything that we, expected in an opening day. John Miller, Master of Ceremonies. They got Jay-Z's. I'm forgetting the name of the song. The winner is Rock Boys. The winner is like the
Mm.
instrumentals playing. It's just traditional opening day. The sun is out. Great time. Didn't result in a win either. Aaron Judge, he was going to make his mark at some point, and he hits a 2-run homer. Giants get shut out in back-to-back games. First time that's ever happened in franchise history to open a series. Third game of the season, they end up scoring a run. Finally, they scored in the bottom of the third, but it took them 20 innings to score a run. That's tied for the longest such streak since 1909. And again, they lose. That game they get swept. And an interesting stat that I put in my story is that Tony Vitello, during his 8 years at Tennessee, only got swept 6 times, and I think I think 3 of the times were like by teams he coached at. I think it was one was by Missouri, two was by Arkansas.
Mm.
Not that who swept him really matters, but you know they get swept to start the season, and it's obviously not a great start to the Tony Vitello era. And there's a lot of places that we can start in regards to how these first 3 games went overall. I think, obviously yesterday is fresh in mind just because we barely saw any, usage of the bench. Tuesday or see my days are even thrown off. Friday was interesting because of what Vitello said post game. Again, opening night was interesting because it was opening night. Where do you kind of want to start as to where and
Ugh.
how these first 3 games of the season started? Because we do have a lot of options. We could also just talk about how the offense scored 1 run in 3 games as well, which
Yeah,
is
let's talk.
not
Let's talk
great.
about that.
Let's talk about that.
I mean, well, where do we start? I mean, it was spring training is like, whatever, but it was a little bit jarring to see them in something of a flow ending spring and then going right into just not being able to hit a fastball, not being able to get anything going. A lot of how they looked at their worst last year, where it's just they look a little bit overwhelmed by the opposing pitching. I don't know if overwhelmed was the right word, but just flummoxed or, just unable to generate much. The at bats got better, and I think maybe Tony acknowledged that the at bats got better over the course of 3 games, but that's a marginal better. It was pretty difficult to watch. Maybe the first 2 games, or you could tell that they're. Um, I mean, they weren't really grinding out at bats the first couple games, and it just it felt very much like it was the epitome of a slow start at the plate for everybody. So I don't know if that seems like the crux of what I was looking at.
Yeah, and I mean, let's take it for what it is. Like, this is the New York Yankees. This is a team that has playoff ambitions, that's been to the playoffs however many years in a row at this point. And even without former Giant Carlos Rodon, even without Garrett Cole, like their rotation is still damn good. And Max Fried is a 3-time All-Star. I think there was also some neat stat that this was like the first opening day start where like 2 Gold Glove pitchers pitched against each other. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but there was
Mhm.
something to that effect. And Max Fried is a damn good pitcher. He pitched 6 1/3 shutout innings. I think Friday's opening day. Again, just the absurdity of like opening night and opening day. They're two openers, and I want to give a quick shout out to the San Francisco Standard because the headline after that game was another opener, another shutout. Which what a headline! Um, but I think Friday was an introduction for a lot of Giants fans to Cam Schlittler. Make sure you say that name correctly
Hitler.
because there's a story in the Athletic about someone was going to mispronounce that name at some point, but like he's got some stuff to him. Like he's throwing three types of fastballs, like not he's touching 99, some great breaking stuff. And take it for what it is. It's two really good pitchers, and you're gonna have these types of games at some point in the season. Like it's an inevitability that you have maybe not one run in three games, but it's an inevitability that you're gonna get shut out. It just so happens to be the first two games to start a season, which after we talked so much in spring training about the depth of this lineup, how adding Arise and adding Bader lengthens the lineup, just not the way you want to start. Obviously, on Saturday, they had the 9 hits, but they just weren't really able to string anything together. They grounded in to 4 double plays. So at least there were signs of life offensively, but as far as being able to actually plate runs. Like we didn't see any exhibitions of the power of this lineup. Like Rafael Devers was pretty much held in check. There wasn't a single homer over these 3 games. The one run came from a Matt Chapman single. So again, it's three of 162. I don't put like a ton of stock into a crazy slow offensive start. I don't even want to call it crazy slow. Like again, like this is kind of bound to happen at some point. But when you open the season by being swept, especially when all the pomp and circumstances made for the new manager, it's just not the way you want to start a season. And I think we can transition into Vitello here. Like, do you want to start with like how he managed these games, or do you want to kind of start with the post game on Friday? Because I don't want to like I want to make this clear. Like I'm not constantly trying to like nitpick every little thing he says, but sometimes it just kind of makes your ears perk up, like the things that he ends up saying.
Yeah, let's talk about what he said Friday because I think that is worth discussing. I think something I have an issue with is this idea that discussing what he said is a criticism. I don't think that we're criticizing, and by we I mean the media. I don't know if we. I think there was a social media reaction to the nature of his comments because it felt very. I mean, it strays from the norm. A lot of managers, when you are 2 games into a season and you haven't scored a run and you're barely getting any hits, then there's a pretty boilerplate response that they give to a tough question. And instead of the boilerplate, he gave something that it was very uniquely him. And then it just kind of the fact that it was unique, everyone had a reaction to it, and then it turns into this is a criticism. I don't think it's a criticism. It's a peek into how he is wants to lead. It was his way of. Maybe I should or you can get into what he exactly said so that we can discuss it more. But
Yeah,
I thought it was
let's
interesting.
let's set the stage here as to what he said. So obviously, opening night they got shut out. Opening day they got shut out, and most managers after being shut out in back-to-back games, and again, like there's an added element to all this because it is, it's his managerial debuts and, it's the start of the season. There's an heightened attention to it. But I think the majority of managers would just say, it is what it is. Like he did have a quote where he said, I think we're overswinging too much. And if you just had that, no one's saying anything about his post-game comments. Like that's a valid criticism, but where, our ears kind of collectively started to perk up was that he told us that a couple days before the season, not before opening night, but a couple days before the season, he made what he referred to as a kind of fire and brimstone. He said that phrase like 3 times.
Yeah.
He made what he referred to as a fire and brimstone type speech where I think he basically said like guys were ready to like run through a wall. And he got the boys fired up. That's kind of the way he said it. I'm not saying it verbatim, but that was the essence of what he was saying. And following the loss, he said that maybe it's a little too emotional in there. Maybe some guys like the emotions are a little too heightened. And if again, I think it's we've harped on the point about him making the jump from college to the majors, and we've harped on it a lot, and we're going to continue to do so. And I think for some fans, it might be like, this is a bit of a broken record, but it's the truth and it's important because this is probably a tactic that he's deployed in college. Like, but in the however many years that he's been in the college game, the 20 plus years, he's probably deployed something to this effect a good amount of times. And he tried to do it in the professional game. Again, we don't know the exact form and function that it took. I think he might have toned it down a little bit for the professional guys. But when Robbie Ray was asked after the game, like whether he said that he felt, I can't exactly remember how the question was phrased, but when he was asked about Vitello's post-game comments, he said, we're major leaguers. I don't think that's the case. Like, we're fine. It's two of 162. And then when Elliott was asked about it, he said, we just need to play better. We just need to execute. Like, there wasn't this. If you went in the clubhouse, like, it didn't seem like anyone was particularly on edge. Like, there are moments when you walk into a major league clubhouse after tough losses and you can feel the tension in the air. And there wasn't really the tension in the air. Like, obviously they're not playing music. Like, no one's in like a chipper mood, but it was just a normal, clubhouse after a loss, which is just kind of dour, kind of tranquil, so to say. Like, no one's really celebrating. And again, like, it just kind of created this. I don't want to say there was a dissonance. Like, I don't want to say like Robbie Ray was like, oh, our manager, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's not what Robbie Ray was saying at all. Like, I think he did appreciate like his manager kind of defending his players, but this is one of the points that we illustrated in spring training that he's dealing with grown men. It's not the 18 to 21, 22-year olds anymore. These are grown men. They know how to handle losses. They know how to handle losing streaks. And when we talk about transitions to the major league game, this is something Vitello himself is going to have to adapt to because, yeah, he's been around the game. He's seen a lot of baseball, but, navigating three losses in the majors, it's inevitable. It's a lot different than navigating three losses at Tennessee. If his Tennessee team opened up with being swept by I don't know who, completely different discourse because of how the games are. So I don't even want to call it a learning lesson necessarily. That was a that was a long ramble. I had a flow state there, but I don't want to even call it that. But it's just something noteworthy. It's just kind of another thing where you kind of put it in the memory bank because again, with what happened in spring training, and you kind of just want to see where these things kind of go going forward.
Well, it was interesting because it's 2 games in, and he's already peeling back the curtain, saying pretty explicitly after the game, yeah, guys in there were pretty emotional. It might have something to do with what I said a couple of days ago, but right now there's guys aren't happy. Like there's having a manager sort of I don't want to say the word exposed, but go to the emotional stuff so soon out of the gate was a little bit it was different. It's I think like it's telling of his style is he's not going to. I think baseball is very used to managers trying to temper the waters inside and out and not show the type of emotions that are happening behind closed doors. But so you kind of got the juxtaposition of Tony's saying maybe what we're not seeing or getting right to the yeah guys are emotional and then you go to Robbie Ray and Elliott and they're saying no, this is it's how it always is. So we're major leaguers, we get emotional but we bounce back and it's not that deep. Not to say that there's sort of a friction, but it was sort of an interesting juxtaposition of and how each side was internalizing the immediate aftermath of a bad start, and how they were projecting it. So I just thought it was interesting in terms of Tony. It's kind of what you expect. He's known as someone that doesn't hold back, and he says what he thinks, and he says what he means, and that's what we got right out the gate.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize the word you used there, friction. I don't think there was any friction.
No,
I don't think that's the case. Like, I think some people interpreted that. I think because we pointed out the juxtaposition of emotions and reaction, people automatically go to there's friction. I don't think there's necessarily friction
no.
in the sense that, you know, or internalizing this one way. And maybe it is true. Maybe there's some younger players on the Giants that maybe were a little too amped up. Like, we didn't talk to all 26 guys. Like, maybe someone was a little more amped up than the other. But it is just something to kind of, again, put in the memory bank going forward. And it is a reminder that, and this is obviously not kind of the moment that, what was it, day 9 of spring training was, but it is just another moment stored in the memory bank. It is something that, how you do have to wonder, like, how often is or are these types of moments going? I don't even want to call them moments. Like, how often is he going to be this transparent or, say his emotional state after a loss? Because, losing streaks like this, they are inevitable. Like, again, I've made this point that, the Dodgers last year, they lost 69 games in the regular season and they still won the World Series. Like, and the most losses that Vitello had in Tennessee in a season was 27. Like, with a season this long, things like this are going to happen. So it's more so just how does he react? How does he evolve as far as his reaction going forward? Because as much as, managing strategy is part of being a major league manager, so is managing the media. Like, that is very much part of his responsibilities. It's not just some kind of, side assignment. Like, this is part of the assignment. And speaking of decisions, I think this is a good segue into kind of how Vitello managed these first, 3 games of his managerial career. And I alluded to it, just the bench usage. There was a couple different things that kind of popped up, but I do want to start with the bench usage. And I do want to start with the fact that we had as much playing time over the last couple days as Gerard Encarnacion and Daniel Susac and Christian Goss. They didn't see the field at all. And it wasn't until the 9th inning of Saturday's game that Jared Oliva was used as a pinch runner for Willy Adames. And Willy Adames, he did look a little shocked when he came off the field. He does have above average speed. He didn't exactly seem content when he was asked about it post game. He said that he believed it was the first time he'd been pulled for a pinch runner, that actually it wasn't. I think there was an instance in 2019. Um, but let's start there. Like, we've seen, it's not that far ago that, Gabe Kapler was, utilizing his bench to the max. Like, he'd run out of guys to use. And then even Bob Melvin, like, he was proactive in utilizing his guys. And it's kind of one of those things where, like, the first couple of games of the season, you want to get some, like, every guy at least a little bit of playing time. And he did that with his bullpen. But I don't know. What were your impressions of just the bench utilization, or kind of lack thereof, overall? And pretty much not until the 9th inning of the third game of the season.
I think the most obvious time to use the bench would have been in that 9th inning when, or not even just the bench, when to sort of get a little. I don't think we've been able to see them get creative with the lineup, with pinch hitting, with matchups. I think that, or with strategy. Like, I think that the 9th inning yesterday would have been a good time to maybe consider laying down a bunt, to consider pinch hitting for one of the bottom of the lineup guys, to get the bench activated, to sort of uh, give the Yankees a different look with the game potentially in reach, to grind out a few different, to grind out a better scoring opportunity. So that felt like the more sort of egregious time when you might have expected the bench that had been idle the entire series to get involved, then didn't. Um, Other than Oliva, and then again that created a little bit of a thing. But I don't know. I'm trying to just take a step back, and I think that there's a very tight microscope on how Vitello is operating the dugout and the roster, and how he's looking at the game, and how quick of a trigger he has on guys, and how much feel he has for his players because he's brand new. And I was trying to take a step back and think. I think that there were a couple of times, last couple of years, where Bob Melvin was more intent on sticking with the guys, showing the guys in the lineup, showing confidence in the guys, and in sort of like a similar fashion, where you think, okay, this is an experienced manager, showing confidence in the starters that he has out there, and trying to build up the early season. I hate to use confidence. Build up the early season confidence in those guys, and not stir the pot. And I think that, so basically what I'm trying to say is, I think that it's both interesting in that it's showing how Tony is or isn't sort of willing to change things up on a dime. But it also, I think that if you were an experienced manager, maybe you would be looking at it in a different way and saying, this is a manager that's trying to show faith and and stick with the players that he has out there and not sort of shake it up as shake up everyone's confidence or whatever. So I think it could go both ways. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think with the decision to pinch run for Adames, because again, like he wasn't exactly like bouncing off the walls when he was asked about it post game, but I think it is I think it is kind of a feather in Vitello's cap that he was willing to make a tough decision like that. Like, yeah, like Adames is a plus runner, but we have like the fastest guy on the team right there. I think the one thing, when we talk about, pinch hitting opportunities in that ninth inning, I think this kind of gets back to the construction of the bench, which this is an exclusively right-handed hitting bench. And when I was doing my opening day roster projections, I it was two roster projections. I put Will Brennan on the bench kind of as that fourth outfielder over Matos, over Oliva, over McRae. Well, McRae's a left-handed hitter too, but I put him there because they just didn't have a left-handed presence, and I thought that it would have been in the Giants' best interest to have that option available on the bench. And yes, they do have, depending on the handedness of the starter, like four left-handed hitters, Bailey obviously being a switch hitter. But, bottom of the ninth inning yesterday, Harrison Bader, runners on first and second, right on right against David Bednar, a multi-time All-Star. That would have been an opportune moment to have a guy like Brennan, come off the bench who, is significantly better against righties than lefties. And Vitello just didn't have that option available to him. So I think it is worth contextualizing that as well. Maybe in that opportunity, because it was a right on right, and that would have been an opportunity to lay down a bunt right there, get both runners in scoring position, and then you bring Patrick Bailey to the plate, who, coincidentally enough, has hit a walk-off homer off Bednar when Bednar was still with the Pirates. I believe that was in 2024. But there was, opening night, not really there wasn't really many opportunities to use the bench at all. But again, like in the bottom of the seventh inning, there was, maybe an opportunity there where Jung-Hoo Lee was going against Tim Hill, who had a 4.44 OPS against left-handed hitters. Now, granted, it's two outs, no one's on base, but that's an opportunity right there where if you want to be, push the envelope a little bit, and I'm not going to get on him just for that because again, it's two outs, there's not a runner on, but it did just feel, especially in that ninth inning, especially later in the game on Saturday, that there were opportunities to, try to utilize his bench in different ways and, maybe get Gerard Encarnacion involved in some way, shape, or form, just because he does have that game-changing power, and it's just something we didn't see. And again, it's a three-game sample size. Like, I'm not going to have this be an indictment on Vitello's ability to manage. I will give him credit in that he was able to get all 8 of his relievers at least one appearance over the course of this series. And, the bullpen, that's another can of worms we'll talk about on another episode as we try to kind of figure out who's in what role. And the bullpen did pitch well, 2 earned runs over, I think, 13 or 12 innings with 13 strikeouts. But the bench utilization, those guys are there for a reason. And I think it would be in the best interest to utilize them a little more, if for no other reason than to just get them active. Because when you're standing around for 4 days and not doing anything, like again, major leaguers, it's all about rhythm. It's all about at least getting some type of opportunities. And even I think in the eighth inning too, like Luis Arias had a single, like that would have been an opportunity to pinch run for Christian Koss, especially because Arias probably wasn't going to come up again if just because it's the eighth inning. So
Yeah.
again, not a grand indictment, but it is something to
Note.
monitor going
Mm-hmm.
forward, especially because he's going to be criticized more than any manager, like fairly or not. Like when you make a move like this, a jump like this, like people are going to be like, okay, what can you do? Like, how good of a manager are you? Like, this is not the type of criticism that Craig Stammen or is going to be feeling, and because Craig Stammen, obviously, we're about to see him in San Diego. So again, just something to kind of note going forward as to we evaluate what type of manager, what type of style that Vitello has.
Yeah, and it's not even a criticism. It's just like okay, what are you about? Like, I think that it's it's more about understanding what his style is, and it's been 3 games, and so far we have extremely small data sample, but you're getting a sense of his style. So you're trying to pay attention to what he does, what he doesn't do, what he says after the game, how he's a take accountability guy. That was his version of taking accountability for I don't know if accountability, but trying to sort of deflect the attention onto him and off the team. And that's his style. And it's interesting. And it was an interesting, uh, display of what happens when you get off to a really bad start is you're focusing more on what could have happened, what went wrong, and how the new guy is handling it. So it was just an interesting sort of the introduction.
Interesting introduction, to say the least. A very adrenaline filled last 3 days of the ballpark. Again, we got the off day today. We're both flying out to San Diego tomorrow, which I'm sure we'll circle back and have another conversation about, what happens in San Diego. I want to leave with this. I'm not active. I want this to be very clear. I'm not actively rooting against the Giants, but I want to make this quick point. Statistically speaking, we're probably going to see Mason Miller enter a ball game during this series in San Diego, and that closer entrance coming out to corn. God damn, that looks crazy. Like, just statistically speaking, we're probably going to see it. And
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where, like, I can only imagine how electric the ballpark is. Again, if you're listening, I'm not rooting against the Giants, but if it does come to it, it looks like one of those baseball things that just looks really cool. That's all I want to say.
I'm sure that we'll see that happen.
But anyhow, Justice De Los Santos, San Jose Mercury News, Shayna Rubin, San Francisco Chronicle. Catch y'all later. I'm now joined by somebody who, quite frankly, needs no introduction. If anything, I'm the one here who needs the introduction, none other than Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic. He's obviously here for the Fox broadcast today. Ken, appreciate you making a little time today.
Just a pleasure, man.
Appreciate you coming on. And obviously, the place where I want to start is asking about Tony Vitello. And, a lot has been made about, this is the first guy to go straight from the college ranks to the major leagues, just straight from that dugout to this dugout. You were obviously there for the first day of spring training. You've gotten to be around him a little bit. Just what have your overall impressions been of the time that you've been around Vitello so far, the interactions you've had, and just kind of seeing him from afar, over these last 5 months?
He definitely is a guy with a lot of energy. He's definitely a guy with charisma. Now, the question is, can he manage in the major leagues? We know he can do it in college. And any interactions he's had with the media, any things we've seen from him in his public forums, I don't think too much about that or worry too much about it. I want to see how he handles the bullpen, how he handles the rigors of 162 games, and all of that. And it seems like he's a really smart guy. And if he's going to make mistakes, I'm sure he will, because anybody in a new job is going to make mistakes. Anybody who's done the job for a long time in their jobs are going to make mistakes. But it's how he learns and how he adapts and how he is going forward. And it's actually, Justice, to me, one of the most interesting stories of the entire season around baseball.
I mean, kind of building off that, you think about, you thought like unique talents. Like, we're obviously in a very interesting sphere in that we have Ohtani, who's a unique talent, Aaron Judge, even who's a unique talent. But when we think of managers, we don't think of that. There's not too many more opportunities for something to be truly unique. And you've obviously covered the game for a while. Like, does this feel like the most unique circumstances of any managerial hire, at least in recent memory, that you've seen?
I would say it's right up there. I always hate to say, it's the most.
Yeah.
Absolutely, this is it. Because there are examples throughout history where maybe it was even more unusual. But his hiring Blake Butera in Washington, age 31 or whatever he is, really out of the minor leagues, that was different too. And we've seen over the years teams increasingly take chances in non-traditional ways. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. I remember when Aaron Boone was hired by the Yankees.
That's what I was going to ask.
No coaching or managing experience. I think I was the only guy in the country, the only writer in the country to say, hey, what are we doing here? Obviously, it's worked out pretty well. I know Yankee fans might disagree, but he's had great success.
Yeah.
So you kind of never know, and that whole experience, even with Boone and others as well, kind of taught me, wait and see. Let's not pass judgment until we see how these different people adapt, because there are managers who are unique, and Vitello might be one of them. He might be the guy who can go from the college ranks to major leagues without professional experience to succeed. We just don't know that yet.
And one of the interesting points about the Vitello hiring that I've seen a lot of people make is that, the collegiate game and the professional game have never been closer. Obviously, you've got guys like Paul Skeens, Nick Kurtz, Jacob Wilson, who have made it to the majors either, prior to a year after being drafted or just a little bit after a year. Do you think that, it is in his favor, just the fact that these games are kind of merging in a sense that they've never been before?
Yes, Justice. And in our meeting today with him, the Fox broadcasters meeting, we asked him about some of the differences. And one of the things he said that stood out to me, and I was going to ask him this, he brought it up, the analytics that they get in college, it's not much different than the analytics they get in the majors. And what is being used in the majors, as we know, is quite advanced. So that is just one area where it's similar. And there are other areas, too, where it has become less distinct from one another over the years. Development, for instance. We see a lot of development in the major leagues now. Well, what do college teams do? They're developing players. So there is something to be said for that, but there are huge differences, too. Handling a college player versus handling a major league player, maybe a guy with a $100 million contract. I know that NIL is money, but it's
that's a whole different.
It's not that
words.
Kind of money.
Yeah.
So yes, it's just interesting for all these reasons. And you're right, there are similarities and there are differences.
One of the, obviously a lot has been made about Vitello, but, he's just kind of one part of the ecosystem here. He's not the one that's playing these games. The players are the ones that play the games, obviously. And the Giants, following the signing of Adames, the big trade of Rafael Devers, they didn't exactly make like one super big splashy moves. It was kind of, to borrow a Golden State Warriors term, it was a lot of strength in numbers here. And I remember you going on Foul Territory. I think this was before some of the hot signings had been made, but you said that something to the effect of, they went out and make the Adames move, the Devers trade, and they haven't really, gone on, supplanted that with another big kind of splashy move that's of substance. Just what did you make of the Giants offseason as a whole, going with more like kind of this strength in numbers approach as opposed to just getting maybe one or two big fishes?
I thought it was a little curious, honestly, because once you plunge, as they have plunged with Adames, Chapman, and Devers, then you sort of have to keep going. They didn't really do that. They didn't do that. And Tyler Mahle's pitching today. He is a really good pitcher when he's healthy. Adrian Hauser can be a quality major league pitcher, no question about it. These guys could turn out to be as good as some of the guys who got big money. We know that. But at the same time, if this team had a true ace, besides Webb, of course they have a true ace, but another complimentary type number 1 or 2 starter, I'd like them a lot better. They also didn't really spend in the bullpen, where they gutted themselves at the deadline last year. Now, it all might work out. I know they're high on a lot of their younger arms, but it was, I would use that word again, curious to me that they didn't maybe go out on a further limb.
Yeah, we've talked about the bullpen a lot on this show, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about the bullpen a lot over the course of this show. Ken, the one thing I'll kind of leave you here with, the last question I'll leave you here with, going back to Vitello, as you see him navigate, his first full 162, what particular area of the managerial sphere are you most curious to see how he navigates? Because there's obviously the grind. It's 162 versus, if we count up all the exhibitions in spring training, we're already halfway through a collegiate season. There's, as you mentioned, you're dealing with multimillionaires. What specific element of his first year are you most curious to see how he navigates?
Steadiness. And we saw yesterday his reaction post-game when he took it on himself to say, hey, maybe I had too much fire and brimstone. These guys don't care. These guys lose 2 games, it's okay. He lost first 2, and it seemed like he was, okay, I've got to take responsibility here. When really, all he had to say, in my opinion, was, it's 2 games, we face great pitching, let's go. He'll learn, and it's going to come, but that is the thing that I am most interested to see. Listen, they're going to lose 6, 7, 8 straight at one point. How's he going to handle that? They're going to win 6, 7, 8 straight at one point. How's he going to handle that? And that whole thing, it's just different than college. When you play 60, 70 games at most, this is a grind. We all know that you cannot judge a team off 2 games or 3 games. In fact, there's been numerous examples lately, recent years, where June 1st wasn't a great judge. Things have happened after June 1st that, whoa, you didn't expect based on the first 2 months. So that to me is the thing. How does he handle the whole grind?
Steadiness, steadiness, steadiness. Ken, usually the thing that I ask guests as they're departing is, where can we find your work? The people know where they can find your work. So I'll ask you this. Where's the bow tie? What's it dedicated to tonight? That's what
It's
I'll
actually a
ask you.
San Francisco-based charity, Old School Cafe. It is a restaurant that is run by essentially disadvantaged youth. It's kind of a cool one. And I only wear this one in San Francisco. It's only relevant in San Francisco, but Old School Cafe, OldSkool, and it's something that actually is a good one for us to do as our group, the Bow Tie Cause, because it's local and has a significant impact.
Ken, I appreciate you for coming on, and hopefully we can do this again later down the road.
All right, Justice, thanks, man.